A Retro Ramble with.
This episode's special guest has literally got his own retro cave full of computers, consoles and games, and is building it up to open to the public to visit later in the year. His YouTube channel is informative to watch, with common and not so common machines being looked at, and also well produced videos with interviews with some of the industry's most well known heroes. It gives me great pleasure to chat to Neil from RMC The Cave.
That's right, yes, yeah. Hello. Hello, cave dwellers, I'm supposed to say at this point, yes.
Cave dwellers, yes. I'm always amazed by how much stuff you actually do in the cave. It's just, especially as you've moved from the smaller cave now to obviously the colossal cave. How is that project coming along? Is it moving along how you expected, or?
It's coming along slowly. I mean, I tried to do a good 1 week's work on creating this. So for those who don't know, I've moved to, I think it's about 100 meters squared, the space here. Is it that much? Yeah, it must be about that. But it's a huge space that we've got. And I try to dedicate a week every month to doing it up. And the idea is to take it from the studio, which is behind me, which I've traditionally had in the old cave, into creating an exhibition space where we can have open days, where people can visit, where other YouTubers like yourself can come and do a show and tell episode or just hang out and create sort of a retro destination for people to come and enjoy. And so obviously it's a lot of hard work, but given the situation we're in the world with the lockdown, it's kind of the ideal time to do it because the pressure's not on me to get it done for people to come and visit right now. The deadline's a bit further down, maybe September, maybe October, whenever we get back to normal. So I'm trying to make good use of the time we've got and create this exhibition, this museum, and get it all ready. But yeah, it ain't half hard work. So
Well,
it really is.
I could see from, I was watching the latest one with putting the wall up and getting the shelves up and doing the routing and all. I'm thinking, I don't even know what half that stuff is. So you must have a good knowledge of DIY. That's all I can say.
YouTube's wonderful for learning these things. Just look up a YouTube video. You'll learn very quickly how to do it. Yeah. No, the most difficult thing is doing it on a budget. You know, I'm trying to use upcycled and recycled things to create a look, and that look is sort of industrial heritage because we are in an 18th century mill here. So I'm trying to make the most of its features, contrasting with 80s and 90s tech. I really like that look, and trying to do that on a budget is quite difficult, so you've got to be creative, but hopefully I'm finding the balance. Yeah,
I can imagine. The first thought I thought when you started doing the project is that this is a great idea for like having schools round and having all the computers set up, that because to actually feel and touch is slightly different to looking at something behind a glass cabinet screen, if that makes sense. You actually interacting with that piece of equipment.
Yeah, and you forget just how far we've come. You know, we spend our days playing with stuff from the 80s and 90s, but I was somebody said today, you know, kids, millennials these days and kids these days, they're listening to and exploring music from the 90s in exactly the same way as we were exploring music from the 60s back in the 90s, and that really made me feel old, you know. And when you apply that to computer tech as well, you kind of take for granted that, you know, everyone knows what a ZX Spectrum is and Amstrad is and how we got from there to the PlayStation 5. And actually, those gaps are missing massively in kids' knowledge. And so schools are perfect. This is the perfect space to have schools and come, be inspired, see, you know, have a giggle at how bad games were and what mum and dad, you know, still think is good, and inspire them and set up the space for things like Scratch coding or Python coding or whatever it is that the schools want to teach these days. I don't have kids, so I'm really out of touch with what they're actually teaching in schools. I don't know if they do coding, but anything that I can do to help in that way, yes, I'd definitely be trying to collaborate with schools for sure.
One thing it will make you feel is old when they visit, because my daughter constantly reminds me that she cannot remember a time without the internet, and that makes me feel really old.
yeah, a time when you weren't connected, you know, when you rode your bike to the other side of town just to see if your mate was in rather than WhatsApping them. Yeah, I can't imagine it.
So what is your first memory of gaming or computers or consoles? Can you remember what that was, the first time you saw something?
Very first memory is quite an unusual one for the UK because my uncle at the time worked in the US and came back and he had an Apple II. And I didn't know anyone before or since in the UK who had an Apple II. So it was actually Oh, the name's just gone from my head. You've died of dysentery. What's
Oh,
the
Oregon
The
Trail.
Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
No, I have this memory of just seeing the Oregon Trail and trying to cross the stream. That's my first memory of a home computer. But the first computer that I got myself was an Amstrad CPC 464, and that was sort of 1986, around about then for Christmas. So I was very young. I remember the day I got it, and I remember the first thing I loaded, Roland on the Ropes, and haven't looked back since. So yeah, it was the Amstrad was the first one for me.
It's funny how those memories as well ingrain into your brain. You can remember everything that you played and did at the time, and I think the problem that our age group suffer with though is nostalgia, because then we look back and we think, oh dear, what is this?
Yeah, I know what you mean. My short-term memory is shot to pieces, but I can tell you exactly what I was doing on Christmas Day, 1986, but not what I had for dinner last night. Yeah, I think we all have that problem. And nostalgia, yeah, it can be very rose-tinted. And that's the beauty, actually, of the community that we've had and the enthusiasm for it. Some of the new developments that come out to ease our lives, particularly with loading games with SD cards and things like that, they really do help us to find that balance and enjoy it a lot more than we did back in the day. I really like that aspect of retro.
Yeah, definitely, because it gives you the ability to play stuff that you probably didn't own back in the day, so you never picked it up, but you look at it now and think, oh, this is quite a good game. I do that quite a lot. Just somebody will say, have you played this on this system? So whether it be on the real thing or an emulation, I'll have a look at it and I think, oh, this is quite good actually. So it's good that we can look back on things like that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's interesting about the Apple II as well, because I think that was an underrated system in the UK, like you say, but it is quite a good system. When you look back at some of the games it had on it, it was a really good system.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the games on the Apple II, but I really do admire it. I absolutely lapped up the biography by Steve Wozniak, I was, and where he talks about developing the Apple and the Apple II, and just his approach to design and his love of making everything as simple as possible. It contrasts very differently with the Clive Sinclairs and the Alan Sugars of the world. There's a beauty in his design, and you just need to take the lid off an Apple II to look at it and go, yeah, really, this has been really well thought about. And that carried through from, what was it, 77, 78, whenever it came out, all the way through to the mid-80s. Just the improvements they went on it, they made on it, the expansions, because it was built with expandability in mind, even though it was quite a small wedge-shaped computer. You could slot in upgrades. I think someone brought out like a sound card for it not so long ago. I can't remember the name of it now, but people are still making things for it. And in terms of the game library for the Apple II, yeah, I really need to delve into that and explore it a little bit more. But as you say, I could very easily fire up an emulator now, or a Raspberry Pi, or a Mister, and dive straight into that. I don't necessarily need the hardware. That's brilliant.
The Mister is one of my holy grail systems that I want to get one day. It's just a bit too expensive at the moment, but I've seen lots of videos. It looks really, really good. It doesn't emulate. It uses the actual processors and things, doesn't it, underneath, I believe, and it's like cores or something like that.
Yeah, so it's filled with logic units, and those logic units are arranged to basically be the original chips and act in the same way. And the beauty of it is that once all of those logic units are broken down into chips, those chips can then run in parallel, just like the original ones were. So a system like the Amiga, where you had custom chips, you had Gary, you had Lorraine, you had all of those chips working together, it can work in exactly the same way. Now, you can achieve that on a Raspberry Pi and on a PC, because the processor speeds are so fast now that you don't notice that it's not doing it in parallel. But there's just a fluidity to the Mister on machines like that. I notice very little difference on a Spectrum or an Amstrad on the Mister, but on machines like the Amiga and above, there's just a fluidity to it. It's hard to explain. You have to try it. And when I open up this exhibition, I'm going to have a corner where modern solutions to retro are hands-on and available to people. So you can come in, you can play on the Mister, you can play on the Vampire V4 standalone, and you can just get a feel without spending £300 or £400 on it. I think people will appreciate that.
Oh, definitely, because I think as well it gives, especially with the schools, if they come and see the original hardware, but you say, well, there is an opportunity that you can do this at home, and it, you know what I mean, especially with emulation, and hopefully that will reignite that computer passion that we felt in the 80s when we were first going through it.
I hope so. And it's funny that you should say that, because I first got into this YouTube stuff with the purpose of trying to reignite the passion, because I worked in IT and I was pretty burnt out. And I thought, well, I'm going to go back and revisit the Amstrad and the Amiga. I'm going to try and rekindle that flame. And actually, it made an even bigger flame. It made a bonfire for retro. And I just walked away from modern IT and said, no, stuff that. So, yeah, it's a dangerous game to play.
I think it's a forest fire that's out of control at the moment.
It is. It's completely out of control.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, and this always makes chuckle because people say, I work in IT, and people automatically think you write games or something. They don't realise a lot of the time you're probably looking at servers or servers that aren't working. It's not about writing games, is it?
Yeah, you're looking at a server and you're thinking, well, I can fix that, but first of all, I have to write a change control document, and then I have to put it through the approval process, and then some bean counter will say, no, you can't do it that way, and it can be the most frustrating thing in the world. It can be very rewarding. I did have good times working in IT, but I think after the best part of 2 decades, most people get pretty burnt out. Unless you're in a very good company and in the company of people who really understand what it's like to work in IT. There are companies out there like that, but many of them aren't.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's too much red tape to get the smallest of thing done that will make life different. But I could totally understand they've got to be secure and all that side of things as well. But yeah, I totally get it. So obviously you touched on your YouTube channel. So you've been running for about, is it since you started in 2012, I believe, around that time?
Well, I registered the channel name in 2012, but that was only for the purpose of selling some things on eBay.
Right.
It wasn't until 2017 that I actually started putting videos out that were anything other than eBay listings. 2017 we'll say. Yeah.
And I think I've had a quick squint on your channel because I watch your videos. I love the teardowns and the talking about them and the interviews. That's the kind of thing I like. Well, looking at the first one you did, and was it the PC Engine, I believe, where you unboxed the PC Engine or TurboGrafx?
Oh yeah, that's actually one of the eBay ones.
Is it? All right, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I know I don't say on the video this is an eBay sale, but I made that video. It was an unboxing where I don't think I even speak. And there's just some music, and I put that on the eBay listing so people could see what they were buying. Because at the time I had a small collection, and due to life circumstances, I had to sell them and raise some money. So I really regret having to sell some of that stuff. Yeah, the Mint TurboGrafx. I had a CDTV new inbox back then. I had an Amiga 1200 new inbox. I had all this stuff that I had to sell, and that's that video that you're seeing. I think the first video proper was a review of, it might have been Lynx. Was it Lynx? Yeah, a helicopter game. I can't remember the name of it now. Because originally, Combat Lynx. Yeah. I was going to start reviewing flight sims because that's an aspect that I really love. So I was going to go back and look at all the retro flight sims that I used to play. So that was, there was no logic behind me starting this YouTube channel and putting content out. It was for eBay. And then it was to explore old flight sims. And then, I've got an Amiga, I'll fix that up and share it. And, there are a lot of coincidences and accidents along the way that have got me to where I am now. Yeah.
But you can definitely see that evolution of where you started to. It's funny though, because I was watching the Combat Lynx one. I think it was on the Commodore 64, and the way you presented the layout is exactly how they're doing it today. So I think you were ahead of your time. With that as well, because you had the game title and you at the bottom of the screen at the left.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I was wearing like a hoodie and a baseball cap, looking like some scally. I mean, it was good fun, and I could quite easily delete those videos. But you know what? I sometimes like to go back and look at a channel that I admire is LGR. Yeah. And I like to go back and watch his really old ones, just because you can see, this person is genuine. They're the same person then as they are now, but they've worked out their audio, they've worked out their camera, their lighting, their color correction, and all of that. And it's just nice to go back to their roots sometimes and say, yeah, you've done well, you've come really far. And hopefully sometimes people will do that with me and go, yeah, okay, he hasn't just turned up with a ton of money in a TV studio. He's worked his way up slowly, iteratively to get where he is. Yeah.
Sorry, is that not what you've done then? You haven't turned up with a ton of money in a TV studio?
Absolutely not. No. Yeah, my truck of cash is outside.
Yeah, your BBC outside unit's just parked in the car park.
No, not at all. I mean, Yeah, the size of the cave and what I do here is a one-to-one reflection of the support that the cave gets from the patrons and the sponsors. So basically, the more support I've got, the more I put into it, rather than just stuffing it into my pockets.
Yeah.
And I think people appreciate that. I think it gives them confidence to
Yeah,
keep giving. Yeah.
I think that's the good thing sometimes about starting off as a small channel, because you can see that it's almost like being in a company and you're working your way up the company. You're learning and you're growing as you go. So yeah, I know totally what you mean. I remember the early LGR ones with the can that he used to open and drink before he said whatever he was looking at that week. So another series that you do on the channel is the Trash to Treasure, which again is something I really enjoy. The electronics side of thing, is that something you've always been into, or is that something again you've learned as you've gone along?
That's something I've learned, and I've never tried to put myself forward as an expert in electronics. I'm more of a break fixer. There are so many people out there, like you've got your Ben Heck hacks, you've got your back office show with Dr. A, you've got Gadget 64, people like that who think, I almost think they turn themselves into an electron and walk around the boards. They know exactly what's going on. Whereas that's not me. You're actively watching me learn with each episode more and more about how these systems work, get familiar with the systems and try to fix them. And where there are gaps in my knowledge, I try to get other people involved to help out, because what's most important to me is preserving and restoring these computers, and not me saying, look, aren't I great? I know all this stuff. And I also, I'd like to think that it makes things feel a bit more accessible to people, because they're looking at me going, well, if he can figure that out, then maybe I can have a go at that. He makes it look not too difficult. So no, I'm not in any way an expert in the electronics. But I'm learning. And a person I've been collaborating with a lot lately is a chap called Mark from the channel Mark Fixes Stuff.
Yeah.
He's, several levels above me in his abilities. Very good at fixing things, as his name would imply. And with the pressure now to build an exhibition space, the last thing I want is people paying for a ticket to come here and spend the day and have everything break. I need to make sure they're getting the best possible experience they can. So I'm working with him now to recap machines, update machines with SD card readers, get all the televisions nice and just make sure everything's perfect. So that's where I am at the moment. But yeah, sorry, I'm drifting away from your original
No, it's
question.
fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Waffling.
That's it's interesting you say about the new tech mixing with the old tech, because I think that is essential for the survival of the old tech as well, to have to recap things and to add things, because otherwise they will just die and disappear.
Yeah, televisions are on my radar at the moment, because when people come here, I want them to have that authentic experience, and for me, that's with a CRT. But they're getting more and more difficult to get hold of, more and more expensive. So my way around that at the moment is, you sometimes see a 14-inch Sony TV on my channel, and I love the picture on it. It's got the SCART input. It does everything I want. So I've gone out and bought 6 more. So on my workbench, I've got 6 identical Sony televisions. They look beautiful. And the idea behind that is, well, look, if I can master one model, I can get all the spares in. It's going to make it easier for me to maintain and keep on top of them. Because the alternative, as I see it, is to go down the LCD television route. And 1 or 2 is fine, but I would be a bit annoyed if I went to a hands-on museum and had to play these things on a flat screen. Fine at home, but I've got paying guests coming here. So I'm doing my best to try and make sure people can enjoy a CRT and hold off from LCDs as long as possible. But quite how long we can hold back the tide, I don't know.
It fascinates me that nobody's ever thought of doing they remake all the consoles. Why don't they remake CRT? I suppose it's the making process that's the issue, and environmental issues, but
yeah, all of the above, I think. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt there's a market, but also if you think about the later CRT TVs, the quality of them wasn't great. It's a bit like how floppy disks got worse and worse. I find CRTs got worse and worse as they just tried to make them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and then they were redundant.
Yeah.
So I tried to get back. The Sony TVs I've got are from 1989. They're just beautiful. So I think if someone tried to go back and make them new, we might not get a good experience. I don't know. Unless it was like Sony and they said, oh, we've got the schematics for this 1989 Trinitron, and we're going to make it exactly how we used to.
Yeah.
Millions of people would buy that, but would millions even be a big enough market to spin up a factory and rejuvenate these old processes? I don't know. Yeah. Elon Musk, are you listening, please?
Yeah, cancel your landing rockets. CRTs are the future. Forget Mars. Yeah, it's interesting because I'm going to say, when I think of Sony, I always think of Trinitron because that is the one that you always wanted to do when you had your computer. Because did it have 60 hertz on those as well, or was it just 50?
I think the one I've got does 60 hertz as well. Yeah, and a lovely, quite a flat screen because there was always the drive to get a flatter and flatter and flatter screen. Yeah. And now in the modern day, you're looking for big curved screen. It's funny how the trends change, isn't it? Yeah. But then, it also depends on the system. So the Amigas, the Ataris, the Mega Drive, the Master System, the NES, I want them on those 14-inch tellies. But then when you get to something like a PlayStation 2, well, I got the PS2 when it came out and I had a 24-inch Trinitron widescreen CRT. So you want to keep it kind of period authentic. Yeah. You want the Atari 2600 on a wood grain TV. I've got a black and white TV for the ZX81. So you still want to try and pair it up nicely. It's not all going to be the same TV.
Yeah, and I think that is a good idea because it's like keeping that period within the period. Because most people didn't have a massive screen. They probably had a black and white portable in the bedroom with a twiddly knob trying to tune it in.
Yeah, exactly. For most of my lifetime as a kid and a teenager, 14-inch in the bedroom was a luxury. 21-inch in the lounge, that was a big telly. 21-inch TV. Yeah. I tried to buy a 32-inch TV a couple of weeks back for my lounge because I got quite a small lounge. You just can't find them. Yeah. It's all sort of 42-inch upwards, which was too big for the space I had. Yeah. Crazy.
I'm just waiting now for the comments that RMC had a 14-inch in his bedroom.
Yeah.
So, innuendo city, here we come.
No comment.
So, from your Trash to Treasure series, then, has there ever been one that you've got that you've started to film or that you couldn't finish because it was just too difficult or too broken, or one that you picked up and started that you did finish and you wish you'd not started it because it became a nightmare?
No, I don't think there's any that have been too difficult. I mean, they're all pretty tricky, but I tend to do as many checks as possible as I can and get parts ordered and do tests before I start filming, because if I don't, I can be 3 episodes in and then go, well, thanks for watching, everyone, but that's the end of that.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching for an hour over 3 episodes, but I can't finish this. Okay, bye-bye. And that's not very satisfying at all. I've certainly made mistakes. Like when I did the Dragon 32, I think I put a cap in the wrong way and it exploded. But it wasn't anything that couldn't be repaired. But the day will come. And, it will make for good entertainment, I'm sure. So long as it doesn't happen every single time I try to do a Trash to Treasure series. They will come, because that's just life. That's just how it is. We run into these problems, and sometimes you have to put your hands up and say, I can't fix this one. And that's where I try and, get people like Mark in or other people in to help me. So no, and yes, I'm fully expecting it to happen, in answer to your question.
I think the older the systems get, the more difficult it is to get certain parts, especially like the specific chips that it requires. You can get the generic stuff quite easy, I would imagine, but specifics would get difficult.
Yeah, and more we're seeing things like there's the replacement for the Amiga Denise chip, so you can get HDMI out. We're seeing ULAs replaced with Raspberry Pi alternatives or Arduino alternatives, and I'm still trying to gauge the temperature of that. How do people feel about that, about putting modern alternative chips in a Spectrum or a BBC Micro? How far can we take it before they say that's not really the original anymore? But then if the alternative is, well, it's not going to work because the ULA for an Electron is a very difficult thing to get hold of. So either you have it with an Arduino working or you don't have it working at all. Where do you draw the line?
It's interesting that, because it becomes a hybrid, but when does the hybrid then become something totally new on its own? It's not the same anymore.
Triggers broom, isn't it? Triggers broom.
Yeah. You've also started doing the interviews with people, and you've written a book based on those interviews called, is it A Retro Tea Break, I believe?
That's right, Retro Tea Breaks, yes. Yeah.
How did that start? Was it something you've always wanted to do, or?
Do you know what? I can't actually remember how it started. I think it probably started through doing my normal episodes and wanting to get comment from a developer. It might have been the Oliver twins or someone like that. And I had that realization that, okay, I've asked this person that was a legend in my childhood, as big as any movie star or footballer to me, with my love of video games, and they've said yes. And as my channel got bigger and bigger, more people seemed to be willing to say yes because they had stories to tell, and they could see I had an audience that they could tell those stories to. So it just kind of evolved quite organically until I realized, okay, I've now got this sort of back catalogue of material now of game developers who I've really enjoyed speaking to, and I picked my favorite 14. Well, it was my favorite 12, and then I did 2 more interviews specifically for the book and put this book together. Over a period of about a year, I put the book together, which would seem to be received really well. I didn't know if people were interested in that or not, but they were. And long may it continue. I've got an interview booked for a couple of weeks' time with John Romero, which is a huge name. Quite nervous about it. Yeah, every single one I get quite nervous before we start.
Tell me about it.
And I find the only way to overcome it is just prepare. You know, I try and do as much research and get as many questions ready. But then on the flip side, I try to talk as little as possible because people want to hear from them and not from me. So it's a real difficult balance, but people seem to enjoy it. They're not my most popular videos by a long shot because they're often 2 hours long and people don't always have that much time to commit to it. But those who do watch it really do appreciate it as an act of just bottling history, bottling the stories from these developers that mean so much to us. And I hope I can do it for as long as possible. Yeah, I really enjoy that part of the channel.
It's funny because well, as you can tell, I was quite nervous about interviewing you because you, to me, are a big star. But then as you go up the chain, the people that you're interviewing are bigger to you, and it's like quite funny that you feel the same way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That same feeling. It's I think that the one I found interesting was the Trip Hawkins one. I really enjoyed that one about the EA and the 3DO. And that sort of leads me on to the next sort of question around, do you feel that in history the consoles that were the innovators weren't always the successful ones? They sort of died?
Absolutely. Yeah. And Trip Hawkins touched on that in his interview, didn't he? Where he was talking about the 3DO and how its aim was to create a much more open system than the Nintendos and the Segas of the world had created. Because he was part with the EA, they reverse engineered the Mega Drive and found a way around having to go officially through Sega's channels to create their games and to have more creative freedom. And he tried to promote that through his own console. Of course, the side effect of that was with the 3DO was the massive retail price because they couldn't sell it at a loss or with no markup whatsoever and make the money back on the games. So that kind of backfired. But certainly in terms of some of the technology, you know, that was a pioneering machine with built-in. It wasn't the first, but one of the first with the CD drive built in. It was pushing for 3D. Games like Need for Speed and Road Rash on it were incredible. And until the PlayStation came along, my mouth was on the floor just looking at that machine when it was in shops. I couldn't afford the £600, £700 price tag, but I would have loved it. And yeah, it was a pioneering machine. So quite often the failures, they're either pioneering or they just have the most interesting stories, and fewer people have had a chance to use them. So they seem to be quite interested in those videos. The more obscure a machine, I've got one next to me actually, the more obscure the machine, the more interested people seem to be. This is next to me here is a Sharp X68000 Expert, which was only sold in Japan. And I've just got it out this morning to start making a video on it. Do you know much about this machine?
I don't know much about the machine itself. I did a live stream I do a live stream every now and again where I play on emulation a system that I'd never owned and never looked at. So I've done the 6800, the games, and some really good games on it. Is it? Yeah. It's like it's sort of like a PC hybrid, isn't it? I think it's got like a DOS Hudson soft OS on it.
Yeah,
it's
got an OS called Human on it, and but it's 68,000 base CPU, so very much like the Apples or the Amiga of the time. Came out in 1988, I think it was. Might have been 87, 88. But as you would have seen from playing some of the games, the quality of the games on it are almost arcade perfect. Because it was used by Capcom as a arcade game development system. So you've got Final Fight, you've got Street Fighter running perfectly on this hardware, and it's incredible. I was an Amstrad and then an Amiga owner, and I rave about the Commodore Amiga, Amiga 500 specifically I had. And my love of the Amiga is reinforced by 3 or 4 decades of nostalgia for it. Absolutely love it. This is the machine that I would say I would erase that. I would go back and I would replace it with this.
Right. That ends the interview.
It's that good.
I'm Amiga through and through. No, but I know exactly what you're saying. When I was playing the games, I'm thinking, are you sure this is an arcade emulation? Have I clicked the wrong emulator here? Because the games are so... Well, they are. They are arcade perfect, literally. And
it's the custom chips in there. My Amiga had the same CPU. My Amiga had custom chips, but it just takes everything up to the next level, and it kind of shows you what perhaps the Amiga 1200 should have been, or perhaps what Commodore should have released in 1990 or 1991. It was that far ahead. The Amiga was a revolution when it came out, and this feels like the same thing. And if any Commodore and Sharp had kind of partnered and got together, they could have created something amazing. But it was confined to Japan, and that's what makes it so interesting. It really opens your eyes when you see the system. So, you've got the failed consoles, the pioneering consoles, and just the unusual and unheard of consoles make for really interesting and content that a lot of people like to watch, for sure.
And that's the other interesting thing as well. You say unheard of, but it's unheard of in the UK, but I suppose in Japan it was huge, or quite, I don't know if the sales were very good, but it interests me how different regions had their own story of those years.
Yeah, and I think YouTube has played a massive part in bringing people a lot closer together in that respect, because we used to hear so much about the video game crash of 1982, and actually now people call it the North American video game crash, because it's better understood that that's a regional thing, whereas before it was just, if you're in America, you just assumed, there was a video game crash and it affected the world. Well, actually no, we still had 10,000 ZX Spectrum titles to choose from, and they kept on coming to W.H. Smith's boots. We were still buying them. We didn't even notice that. So I think YouTube's playing a big part in that aspect of the storytelling.
I think as well, I know you touched on this in one of your videos, that you were thinking of doing like a secret arcade or a shop type thing in one of the rooms. I think that is a fascinating idea, because it reminds me of have you ever heard of a place called Beamish, where they've got it's like a living museum basically. So I think it's the 18th century, and you go and it's like literally an 18th century town.
I have heard of this. Is it the same place where the Repair Shop TV show program is based, or is that somewhere else again? Because I know you can visit that as a destination.
I'm not
Might be different.
sure.
Might be different. But I know the place you mean, like a living, breathing place where you can go and experience history. And the arcade, which is over here, well, there is no arcade. It would be over here. It's an area of the cave that I don't rent, but it's available for me to rent if I can raise the funds. So that is a goal. If we get to 2,000 patrons, we're a long way off that yet, but if we get to it, that will give us the funds to rent it, but also to buy the arcades, because we need to fill it up with stuff. And my idea would be, let's get the neon carpets, let's get the the lighting from the period, let's get original arcades, not replicas. We'll try and get originals, and we can trash to treasure them and get them up to original spec with their CRTs in, so you can walk in there, you can have period music playing, dim lights, the hairs on your arms going up as you walk past the CRTs, and you feel the static, and just all of that authenticity. I'd love to recreate that. And then the shop display was an idea I had. It's evolving a bit because it was going to eat up too much room, but I wanted to create a shop front where you could just look in the window and see all of the systems in their boxes, just as you did on the high street. I'm having to revise that idea a little bit, but I'm still trying to work it in somehow. I might move the shop front to an area in front of the studio where I'm sat. So you have the shop front, and then you come in and you're in the studio, which is it's kind of shoppy. There was no shop like this in the 80s. You didn't have your computers laid out like this, but you can still go up to shelves. The more you think about this stuff, the more ideas you come up with, and you think, well, I need to rent another floor and another floor. I want to create the whole of W.H. Smith or Dixon's from the 90s. But yeah, it's sometimes my dreams are a lot bigger than what's possible.
The reason I like that is because my first ever Saturday job was in a computer shop in where I live called Microphone, and I can remember it now. You walk through the doors and you had the C64 and the Spectrum tapes on this wall on those racks, and you had the Master System and Mega Drive on that wall. And on the tops, you had, like you say, the big boxed Flight of Fantasy packs and
got Micro Fun.
Yeah, it was. I think there was 2 shops in the local area where I lived. They were like, it wasn't a big chain. It was like a little local computer shop. But I said on one of my other videos, it always makes me remember that when that excited child came in with the parents and they bought the Bat Pack or the Flight of Fantasy Amiga pack, they always bought the 512K expansion as well and 10 blank discs every time.
Knew exactly what they were doing. Yeah.
But I think
sure you don't want to buy any software? No, just blank disc, thank you.
Yeah, and in them days you could actually buy we had like a roll of 500 disc labels, and you bought the disc labels at a penny a disc label. So you rolled them off and ripped off how many you wanted if you wanted extra.
Oh, nice. Yeah. No, my Amiga 500 came from Lansdowne Computer Centre in Bournemouth, and I don't think there were any packs at that point. So it was just the computer. Excuse me. Came with a game called Eliminator and Power Play. So not the best games in the world, but they were a big step up from my Amstrad CPC. Yeah. I loved those independent computer shops. And in my town, there was one called Double Drive Computers, which kept its name well into the 2000s, which didn't really make much sense anymore. Double Drive. So they renamed the shop to Double D Computer, which just kind of didn't work any better.
No, it's like women's lingerie. Did they move tact?
Yeah, a bit of an odd. And I think they're still going, but all they really sell is like ink cartridges and consumables and things like that, because you have to. You can't compete with the Amazons and the eBays and all the rest of the world now. Yeah. So it's sad. So if I can recreate any sense of that shop experience in here, then that would be great. I think people would enjoy that.
Definitely, it would be really, really good, I think so. What is you touched on the Amiga. I enjoyed the CDTV video you did recently about the CDTV, and I enjoyed the interview you had with the lady. I'm just trying to remember her name. The lady who Gail Wellington.
Gail, that's it. Sorry, it's gone from my head as well. Yeah,
we're getting old. I found that really interesting because, again, I love to hear the stories behind the systems. And again, it's one of those systems that Commodore obviously had the idea that multimedia was going to be the future, which in reality that's what it's become, but it was just too early a time to do that.
Yeah, it was the right decision, wasn't it? Which you don't often say about Commodore, but it was the right decision to want to go down that path. And they weren't the first. You had the PC Engine back in '88 with the CD-ROM add-on. And there was the, what was the other computer? The was NEC brought out a computer, again gone from my head, but there were a couple of other computers that came with the CD-ROM as standard, and we were starting to see it on the PC and the Apple Macintosh, but the problem was they tried to recycle the Amiga 500 hardware, and again this is where they should have stepped it up with something of a Sharp 68000's capabilities. The Amiga 1200 or the AAA architecture should have been ready at that point. Or the other thing they should have done is just forget the CDTV and just release the CD-ROM, the A570 for the Amiga 500, and let people use that. But they were aiming at this idea of getting a computer in everybody's living room, in everyone's lounge.
Yeah.
And that concept was too early. So I don't think the CD-ROM was too early, but I think the concept of putting it in the living room was too early. And we'd later go on to see even Bill Gates in the mid-90s say, my goal now is to put a computer in everyone's living room. But he didn't get anywhere near to achieving that until, the Xbox, really.
Yeah.
He tried it with Windows Media Center editions and things like that, but it was really the Xbox that got them into the lounge, Microsoft. So, again, it came back to games. And what Commodore were trying to do was shun games in place of edutainment and encyclopedias and things like that. So yeah, they just missed the mark, didn't they? It could have been so very different.
Do you think, though? I sometimes think that that's a good thing, because I think if Commodore and Amiga would have continued to today, it would have diluted that past history. Because now it's got its place in history, that timescale of 85 to 95 sort of thing.
Yes, but on the flip side, a lot of people are nostalgic about old PC games, and the PC continues, even though it's unrecognizable from what it was. It's iteratively improved over time. So you could argue that, yes, we might still have nostalgia for the Amiga 500, even though we're using Amiga 7000s or whatever today. It may still be there. I don't know. I would be very surprised if an Amiga of today still had backwards compatibility without using emulation, though.
I think the reason the PC sustained was obviously it moved into the games market with the 3D cards, and so it became a viable gaming machine, and also the fact that anybody could make them. I think that's what made it easier for it to survive, possibly.
Yeah, anyone can make them. That was true of the Amiga as well, but yeah, definitely the 3D and the power. As soon as the 486DX processors came on the scene, and you started seeing games like Need for Speed, there was just nothing that the Amiga could do, even with its flagship 4000 or its CD32. Just didn't have the 3D or the processing power. The DX wasn't 3D hardware; it was just a really powerful processor. And then you got your 3DFX cards and onwards. So, yeah. What ifs? So many what ifs. My entire life is just my entire channel is what ifs.
I always remember my first when I bought the 1200, the Amiga 1200, and my friend had a 486, and I remember seeing 4D stunt driving and Elite Frontier, and I just. Because obviously, even on the 1200, it still jerks when it's playing it. But on his, it was quite smooth, and I was just gutted that I'd bought the 1200. But then I moved into the 486, and again, I bought it at the wrong time. I bought the SX25 just before the DX came out. So obviously, it wasn't as fast. So I'm always behind the curve with everything.
Yeah, no, I did the same. I went from an Amiga to an SX, a 486 SX. But it was still fast enough to run a Doom at a good lick, and that was a real killer. So I enjoyed that. And then the PC I had was such that I could take out the SX a little bit further down the line and put a DX4100 in there, and that worked brilliantly. I got Quake running on that. It wasn't the smoothest Quake experience, but it worked. And I was still pretty naive in PC ownership then, and upgrading these things. And my SX didn't have a heatsink or a fan on it. It didn't run that hot at all. So I just put a DX4100 in with no heatsink and fan. And looking back, yeah, it did crash once in a while. It did just randomly reset once in a while. But my God, that thing must have been running hot, and I got a lot of gaming out of it. And then soon after, I learned what a heatsink and fan was for.
Is it still melted to the desk now as we speak? Never to be moved again.
Now I look back on the Amiga with so much nostalgia, but at the time, I didn't look back at all for 2 decades. I got the PC. I still thought about the Amiga and appreciated it, but I didn't look back in really getting involved in gaming on it, because at the time I was just all about the cutting edge, and the PC was where it's at. The Amiga was old hat.
Yeah, definitely. And each I think, I don't know if you're the same, but each console or computer you get, you have your own memories of it. My memories of the PC are trying to rewrite config sys files and auto execbats, not loading mouse drivers in so I could get a game to actually work.
Yeah, type in mem to see how much of that 640k was available. Ultima 7 was the absolute worst. You had to free up so much memory to get that working. And I used to have a config and auto exec on different disks. So if my dad wanted to play a game, he could put in the right disk to get enough free memory to launch the game. And I do all sorts of intricate menus, so he could just press a button to launch a game. And, spent more time doing that than playing games a lot of the time. But that was all part of it, yeah.
It's funny because my friend, he actually contacted me about a month ago. They'd got this cutter where he works, and it actually ran on old DOS, and the company had sent him the update, and it was an ARJ file, an ARJ file, like a zip file, and they couldn't unzip it, so he had to bring it to me to put one of my old PCs to actually unzip it onto disk for him onto a thing.
Wow, it's amazing, isn't it? You know, there's a lot of CNC machines and cutting machines and all sorts out there that are still running this hardware. That's fine, you know, they're not on the internet, they're not connected, so they're doing their job. But yeah, you just want to see if you can run Doom on the cutting machine when you see it.
Don't tell LGR, he'll be trying it. Do you play modern gaming? Do you play the PS5 or the Xbox or anything like that?
I haven't got a modern games console. Modern gaming for me is Steam on my PC, because I do a lot of video editing, obviously, so that has it had a decent card. It's got a 1070 in it, which is getting a bit creaky and old now, but still runs a lot of modern games. So yeah, I don't have a lot of time to do it. When I've got time, I've got a Vive HTC Vive headset, so I like to do a bit of VR gaming, because VR for me, it gives me that same sense of wow, that same moment of being thrilled like I was when I got a 3D FX card or when I upgraded to that's the quantum leap for me at the moment in video games. And I'd love to get a pro version of the headset. I'm still on the lower resolution one, so I'd like to see a lot more VR games. I really like that experience.
If I had £1 for everybody I've talked to who said that's give them the same feeling as when the first computers came out, because I had the Oculus Rift CV1 headset. I did actually get rid of it because I found that with my glasses it was giving me motion sickness, and I think that's more because my glasses were on my face and stuff. But when I was in it, I really enjoyed it. We used to play something called Big Screen. I don't know if you've heard of that, where you can sit in a cinema and watch. We actually played an Amiga emulator on the screen while all his mates were in there.
Oh wow! Where was my invite? I'd like to play that.
But it, like you say, it's just that experiencing something that isn't an upgrade from something else. It's totally new. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Sea change. And the availability of games now, they're just so easy to download, so cheap, some of them. You don't have that whole experience of saving up your money, riding your bike down the shop, trying to make the best choice you can, and then going, well, I bought it now, I've got to live with this game for the next month until I can afford the next game. Everything's so easy to chop and change now. And you just don't feel that I guess that commitment to a game. You can so easily just move on from a game. And with VR, you've committed a lot of money to the equipment to get it on your head. So you're determined to put the effort in to get the most out of the experience. And it's such a different experience. And an experience that I've been waiting for such a long time for. I made a pilgrimage to the Trocadero Centre in London just to play the Virtuality VR machines back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, I was like, yeah, this is the future. This is going to be in our homes very soon. And I just waited and I waited and I waited. And, I bought stereoscopic glasses for my PC that worked with DirectX, so I could look at the monitor and have depth perception, but that still wasn't the same as having it strapped to my face. I waited, and finally it's here. And now it's here and it's great. The games just aren't coming. There just aren't enough games coming for it. So, I don't know what the future is for VR, if it's going to get the AAA titles or not. I hope it does.
I think it will. I just think it's a bit like we've just been talking about. It's just waiting for that one company to come along to bring that one out that causes it to explode. It's like a video going viral, I suppose, isn't it? It's just like one version that'll come out at some point.
Yeah, it's open. Half-Life 3 or whatever it's going to take. We had a Half-Life Alyx, didn't we? I haven't tried that yet. Have you tried that one?
No, it's supposed to be really good. Yeah. I struggle with motion sickness, so I'm a bit annoyed. I want to replace my eyes with some 4K ones, I think, at some point.
Yeah, I find the best games are the driving games and the flight sims, because your mind is expecting you to be sat in a seat. I get motion sickness as soon as it's It's that sliding motion.
Yeah.
That just sends me haywire. Yeah.
Did you know you can actually, you talked about the virtuality game. You can actually download. Somebody's made that, haven't they? I know they've made it for the Rift, so I would imagine it's for yours as well.
Ooh, which game is it?
It's the one where you shoot. Is it like some flying bird you have to shoot with a?
Oh, the pterodactyl one. Yeah.
But they've made it exactly the same with the blocky coloured graphics and stuff. I think it's online somewhere. It's free to download, so you'll have to.
I'll have to look that up. Yeah, yeah. I went to the Leicester Computer Museum not so long ago. I don't know if you've ever been there, but they've got virtuality kit there and working, and they've got that game, and they've got 2 of them, so you can play head to head.
Oh, right.
Deathmatch, and it works surprisingly well because you've got the gun, which is motion tracked, and that actually works really well. You can properly aim and shoot at people, so it was great technology for the time. Yeah.
Wasn't that didn't it run on an Amiga 4000 or something, or have I misread that?
I think it was a 3000 with a custom GPU in it. Yeah, but pretty much so 90% Amiga. Yeah.
So it did eventually have its 3D outing.
Yeah.
Talking about modern gaming and the future of gaming, I don't know if you feel this, but I feel like sometimes I've turned into my parents when they used to say, "Oh
yeah,
that's not music, that's just the noise." You look at how gaming consoles have come on to a point where they're literally the same machine, just a different badge on the front with a slightly different graphics processor or whatever. They're basically PCs in a box. But I find it fascinating that both companies now are not so much pushing the machine, but pushing the online game services to sell the machine, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you see that as well?
I see that as well. Yeah, they're definitely becoming generic PCs, and they have to, because that's where the GPU companies are creating these incredible 3D cards. Why not use them? Why not use the cutting edge in their games consoles? And also, this might be, don't quote me on this, but this might be the last generation of fat hardware in our lounges, because surely soon we're going to go thin client gaming. It's going to be the battle of, can Sony or Microsoft have the most powerful data centers that can give us the most amazing graphics streamed to a thin client box, rather than kicking out heat underneath your television. And that may well tie in with environmental factors. Who's going to be the greenest games company? Who's going to power their data center with renewable energies and things like that? I think in 10 years' time, I think that will factor in a lot more. So this may well be we may look back nostalgically on this generation as the last fat client game consoles. But we'll see. Don't quote me on that. I may look very stupid in 10 years' time.
If they do, you heard it here first. I totally agree. I think you've only got to look back at the different generations, like when you'd got like the 5th generation with 11 consoles plus out there, then it went to the 6th with 4, and now we're literally at 3, if you like, the 3 big ones. There's going to come a point where, as well, graphics get to a point where they can't physically go any further than what reality is anyway, and we're already close to that anyway.
You are sounding like your dad now. I remember people saying that in the 90s. Oh my god, this 3D graphics is so real, it can't get any better than this. But you can always add more detail, even if it comes down to rendering every single grain of sand on the beach. We can always add more. Or more intricate cityscapes to walk around, or bigger worlds. I think we've got a long way to go yet. Yeah.
I think that'll be it. It'll be more the size of the area than the actual graphics, I think. Do you think? Where it's like, instead of... I can remember on some of the older consoles, like the Saturn, especially Daytona, with the draw distance and the fogging. Obviously, that's all a thing of the past now, and because you can have the whole city rendered and everything. And
yeah, and you have, at the moment we have game engine companies like Unity, who make these engines that make it easier for developers. But when you get onto worlds of such scale and the detail that they're going to require, are we going to get to a point where you have the game engines, but you also have world engines where you go, okay, I'll just buy that world and customize it a little bit for what I need. Can I buy this ready-made sci-fi world and customize it, or just the planet Earth? Can I just buy the whole planet Earth mapped out in intricate detail, and then I'll make my racing game around existing circuits that are perfectly laser scanned already in there? There's got to be a balance to help game makers to get that level of detail. Yeah,
definitely. And I'm waiting for the first Grand Theft Auto where you can actually go into a shop and purchase items, and it comes through Amazon or whatever. So you actually see it on the shelves, and you buy it, and it comes next day.
You'll go and buy your C64 in massive amounts of detail and sit down and play it in GTA. Yeah,
it's the future, I tell you. So I suppose the last question is, you've touched on you like your flight simulators. Have you played the latest one, the Flight Sim 2020? Do you
I
play on
have,
that?
yeah. I got the physical edition of that on 10 DVDs, and after I installed it, it still wanted to install a massive online update. So I could have just installed it online.
It's funny because I did exactly the same.
There you go.
Just for not buying the doing the install, like you say, then 16 gig later.
Yeah. So it's still nice to have the physical thing, and I'm a big fan of a flight sim called DCS World, which is the combat flight sim, and I've been following that since we had the A10 version before it was DCS World, and then it was based on, in the 90s you had a game called Flanker, and it evolved from that, and just the amount of detail in it now, you have to actually become a pilot to be able to know what switches to press to get the damn thing up in the air. But flight sims have always been an act of rewarding you for the effort that you put in understanding these systems, and I genuinely find that rewarding to be able to look down and use all the screens in the cockpit and achieve the mission goals. Yeah, love that genre.
So will we see you flying a real plane anytime soon?
I'm crap with heights. And this is another problem in VR. If you put me in VR and I'm looking down, I just fall over. It's terrible.
Have you tried VR on the flight sim? I've not actually tried it on that.
There's, what's it called now? There's one called. Hang on, I've got Steam here. Let me pop it up. So there's a flight sim on Steam that I love. It's quite arcadey. VTOL. Okay, so it's called VTOL VR. And you're in sort of a modern version of a Harrier jump jet, hence the VTOL. So you can look around you, but also everything you have to touch in the game. So you're not using your keyboard. So you actually flick all the switches up, pull the cockpit shut, grab the joystick, and it's just really, really immersive. So VTOL VR, I'd recommend to anyone who likes their flight sims, but it's a very easily accessible flight sim, and with that sense of depth in VR. And being able to look around. It's a really good experience.
I can imagine. I bet it's surreal. I bet it's really, really good. I think flight sims are one of the genres that are really made for VR, just for that reason.
Definitely, yeah.
So, well, can I just say it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for taking the time out, because I know you've got your cave to build. And
No, I've loved it, Dave. Thank you. Yeah, very relaxed, nice chat. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And keep up the good. I'll put links to your channel below in the comments.
Next time on A Retro Ramble.
I never really understood them or kind of saw the appeal of them until we actually went to Japan a couple of years ago, and you go into the arcades and it's like actually that experience of kind of sitting down in front of it, and it's such a nice compact little thing, and because they are all built to the same standard, they all use the JAMA standard, all the games and things are interchangeable between them, and I just think it'd be a nice tidy compact little thing to own, and actually quite useful quite usable.
I would just like to say a big thank you to all the special guests who took the time out of their busy schedules to appear on Retro Ramble. It is really much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you for watching this episode of A Retro Ramble with. All links to the special guest channel can be found in the description below this video. If you enjoyed watching, then please like and subscribe and click the bell notification icon to be informed of when the next episode is uploaded.